I think the overall um, environment that I had was not really conductive to pursue science, I'd say. Uh, my friends, my family were not really in science, so that felt like a very exotic idea.
Welcome to Women in Quantum.
Welcome back to Women in Quantum, the podcast where we spotlight the brilliant women shaping the future of quantum technology. I'm Candice Gilhooly, and in each episode, we go beyond the headlines to explore the real stories behind the science, the career pivots, the breakthrough moments, the challenges, and the quiet persistence it takes to build in one of the most complex fields of our time. This show exists for a reason because too often in deep tech, women are still the only ones in the room by themselves, and visibility matters, representation matters, and the stories we talk about really do matter. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Bruna Shinohara. She is a staff scientist in quantum at CMC Microsystems. Hello, Bruna. How are you doing today?
Hi, Candace. I'm great. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I'm really excited. I remembered our pre-call, and you just have a really fascinating story. And so I'd like to start at the very beginning. Can you tell me where you grew up?
So I grew up in São Paulo, Brazil, kind of a suburb in São Paulo.
Okay. Now, when you were a little girl back in grammar school, did you have a certain proclivity, a certain interest for a particular topic?
I remember mostly being drawn to writing. I remember writing a lot. My father is a journalist, so I have quite this influence, and just humanities in general. Science was not really on my radar when I was a little girl.
Okay, so then when did science all of a sudden start exciting you?
Uh, I guess it came in phases. When I went to the university, I started actually with biology after like discussing with my parents a little bit. But it was a program which started with like a bachelor of sciences, and then you would start picking the subjects, right? I wasn't really sure. I was somewhat interested in like marine biology, but I didn't really quite grasp what it takes. So that was the first contact. I still felt like maybe I should be in humanities. But once I started taking the courses, I got really fascinated by physics one, physics two. That was my first time that I actually saw science subjects being taught in a way that I found very interesting. Like I think during high school, everything was like, wow, this is the formula, and you do something with this. But I never understood where it came from. So the first time that someone was like, oh, this is why energy is conserving in the system, it's like, oh, that's fascinating. And you can translate this to mathematics. Uh, that's when it clicks, and I feel like my mind expanding. So like I was like, oh, I like humanities and I like science too. Turns out that I really didn't like biology too. That's what I found out. I was like, oh, I don't like this. And then I started driving towards physics.
Okay, so then what was your discipline when you were in university? What did you get your degree in?
I got the Bachelor of Science Technology and Physics.
Okay. Okay.
There are two
And
different bachelors over there. You get this first general
okay.
one and then Bachelor of Physics.
Okay, and so then what was your next step?
Then I went to the Master's in Physics. And over there, I study open quantum systems, a little bit of general relativity. When I was in undergrad, I studied plasma physics, which was interesting. But I remember when I was looking at the subjects, I really found I really like the counterintuitive parts of physics. Everything that you think that should go one way is a completely different thing that actually happens, like quantum mechanics and general relativity, all those more abstract things. So I decided to go more in a quantum mechanics route. And then for my PhD, I was sure that I want to do something in quantum mechanics, but not exactly what I was doing before. So I went to work more with like condensed matter, quantum materials. Yeah.
And so did you do all of your educational training in Brazil?
Most of it, but there was a few times that I went abroad. So when I was in my undergrad, I spent 1 year in the US, thanks to a program between Brazil and the United States.
Okay.
So yeah, I took 2 semesters plus a summer internship, Pennsylvania and Colorado. And
Okay.
then during my PhD, I spent 6 months in Denmark doing research. Yeah.
Okay. That's exciting. Okay. That's exciting. So let me ask you, was there a moment early on in your journey when you were learning about physics and what's exciting to you about quantum when someone underestimated you? And how did you process that at the time?
Oh, for sure. I think the overall um, environment that I had was not really conductive to pursue science, I'd say. Uh, my friends, my family were not really in science. So that felt like a very exotic idea. And Um, I remember the first people that I saw doing something in STEM related was on the professional course that we would took together in high school, our optional course. So that's when I started seeing a few people going for science, a few women going to do like mechanical engineering. It's like, okay, that's when it first click. Oh, that might be a way to go, but still felt like something very different from what I was used to see other people choosing as a career path. Uh, and then when I went to university and started getting interested in physics, I remember hearing a lot of, "Are you sure?" It was like, okay,
And that
there's
creates the
so
doubt, right? That creates the doubt in your mind. Like when you keep on asking, keep on asking you if what you're trying to pursue is what you really want. And some people will start to be dissuaded, right?
yes. And it's very hurtful because sometimes it comes from people that are close to you and you expect them to support you. But I guess precisely because it felt like such a faraway career path. I guess it also comes from a place of trying to protect you, right? Well, don't try to be an astronaut if this is not a plausible career path. Uh, and I think a lot of as I progressed in academia, even at university, seeing like science outreach projects and like getting to know professors with different careers and lives, just getting to know a little bit more, getting more in contact with people that would do this, then it kind of made me feel like, well, that's not that far away of an idea. Uh, and I still think that's super important to be able to try to picture yourself doing this kind of things, right? And well, as I progress, like when I was in undergrad, I heard several comments from colleagues and friends, like generally subtle, but you could feel a lot of not believing you, like, oh, so you had this mark, you had this grade, same as me. I was like, well, why is that impressive? Like I'm taking the same course as you, right? And for sure, as I progress, as I got my undergrad degree, some people start questioning me less. My master, some people question me less, but still, there's always as much as got awards and like diplomas, things got better, but still, they still lurk around. I will always have something. I don't know, at least once a month that will say, "Wow, this person was mean. This person was thinking less of me."
So every deep tech career hits bottlenecks. What has been your most frustrating stuck moment? And how did you work your way through it?
Mm, I would say if I were to include my university days, I think the so something that looking back is actually funny for me now, but I did fail a course in programming. And I remember being very frustrated because it was one of the earliest course. I was really not used to the university rhythm, like coming right after high school. And I failed, and then I decided, well, I don't think I can program. This is not for me. And now I program every day, basically. So, and I remember it took me a lot of not simply studying, but just convincing myself that I could do it. My first contact was in Java, which people now discuss even till now that that was not the best choice for an introductory course for programming because it's a very a weird language. It's interesting, but it's not intuitive. Like Python would be a much more suitable choice. So it took me years to get back to it and be like, well, okay, let's give it a second shot. And then I found out that I'm not bad at it. I think there were a lot of factors, both from my side, my own immaturity, and like some structural factors of how the course was laid out, uh, that really made it difficult, but not impossible. And I'm very glad that I tried to give it a second shot at programming because now it's such an integral part of my life.
For women coming into quantum who may be facing the quiet doubt from others, what inner muscle do you think they most need to build?
Mm, I think something that got me, I got better at it as time passes on, is to have ways to remember that I know what I'm doing. Have this in my arsenal. Exactly just relate to your last question. When you got a problem, how did I solve this? uh, Sometimes, wow, what the resources did I look on this website, or did I? Mostly, it generally boils down to I just calm down a little bit and get out of my own head. But if you have just a repertoire that you can go back to, of those were my victories, those are the ways that I struggled, but I got back and manage to work the situation out, then you can build a confidence in yourself that you can do it. Even though like this challenge is a bit different, but I had other challenges before, and then it's easier when something else comes up.
So, when you first started learning about quantum, do you remember a specific moment where it went from being interesting to being just irresistible?
Mm, I think it was really in the first course that I took, like modern physics was not even like proper quantum mechanics. Just that there was so many things that were so different and counterintuitive. And I remember that was first year of undergrad. One of the um, recommended literatures besides the pedagogical stuff, books that we should read. They also recommended, I think, Alice in Quantumland. No, Alice in Quantumland, I believe. I don't quite remember because I'm not sure if that's the name in English because I read in Portuguese. But it's a book that kind of follows like a Alice in Wonderland type character, and she faces a bunch of quantum-related phenomena. And it was so fun to read and so interesting, and it really uh, makes the interesting and curiosity aspects with like actually clarifying me to me, oh, this is what the uncertainty principle uh, is, in a very, of course, high level way, but then, oh, why this is interesting. Then I think really opened my mind to how fun it could be. And I'm very glad that it's like more than a decade later, I still find it very fun. And I still get surprised by new results. I think it's a very insane uh, and interesting topic.
So when you were back in the University of Sao Paulo and you were getting your PhD in physics, what shaped your research focus at the time?
Um, I guess I was mostly finding out what things I liked and I didn't like. So at that point, I found out, okay, I don't really like topics that are more classical physics, just with no quantum elements. So I was sure that I want to work with something quantum. So when I talked to the university professors, there were some people working with stuff related to quantum technologies, quantum computers that I heard about. I was not super into it. I was not. It's not a topic that I was thinking, wow, I should pivot to that. But I had an idea. I noticed that it was like growing in interest. And this particular professor was working with topological quantum computing, which for me also is another thing that I think I just went being very driven by curiosity because, like, oh, topology is an interesting part of mathematics that I would like to know more. So I'll just see stuff that I'm not really familiar necessarily, but I'm very interested and gave it a shot. So I think that's how I entered my PhD. And during my PhD, I think at the halfway point, that's when I realized that I didn't want to pursue an academic path. There was a few aspects of it. For instance, I never ever uh, actually liked teaching, which is kind
Okay.
of funny. And I still like at least in Brazil, especially in Brazil, it's kind of hard to have a fully research focused career and not research plus teaching on the university setting.
Okay.
We don't have like solely research careers, so that was a point for me as I wasn't sure if I was going to go abroad. Among other things that made me realize that academia was not really what I want. So that's when I started to look, wow, what could a job outside academia that also involves quantum tech would look like? And then I started looking around and was they really were interested in someone with a background in physics, which I had, and people that would program in Python, which I was programming in Python thanks to the second chance I gave to programming. So I look at all the specifications, seem a lot like stuff that I could provide, but also there are things like communication skills, which sounds like generic, just generic qualifications and requirements for a job. But for me, it was interesting because I was also at the time already exploring science communication by myself. I was doing science communication on quantum physics and quantum computing. Uh, and it always felt like science communication and research for me were at odds at all times. That was another struggle that I have when I was on my PhD. Pursuing science communication, um, having my own science outreach adventures, and I was part of a group that I also did by myself, especially in social media, and pursuing a PhD. That was something that was some people had a resistance to it. Some people are like, well, maybe you should focus on your research, and I did try to focus only my research. I was like, well, I really like science communication. I really like the aspect of talking to people. So I noticed that this kind of job opportunities, they would actually converge those things that I think I could provide. So they will finally not be at odds. And that's how it is right now because my current job, I do have the technical aspects. I'll conceptualize quantum algorithms, help run the codes with people, but also I have another component of the job, which is preparing training material, delivering like workshops and training. So it brings this both of these aspects. Uh, and it's nice to be able to work with those things that I liked and spend quite some time thinking that would be incompatible forever.
Okay, so communication, I mean, communication is so vitally important in every aspect of our world, especially in deep tech. What other soft skills do you think women could could develop in order to get themselves into the quantum ecosystem?
Um, this is something that I gave a few talks on careers in quantum, and I always highlight this, but I think it's especially important for women. But I highlight this especially for people that come from academia. We have a big issue of downplaying ourselves. We never think we're enough because I think it's just the language and how people speak to each other within the university setting. You don't want to say, oh, I really know this language. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, and that like uh, trickles down in how people communicate. So they're like, oh, I know this topic, but I don't really know about it. But the person actually knows. Like if you think of like a pool of candidates, this person that thinks they know just a little bit of this topic, they actually know a lot. It's just that they are in a very highly qualified and highly specialized environment, right? So when they're going to do a cover letter for themselves or present themselves on an interview, they don't play themselves in a way that the other candidates will not. And this is a particular issue for women, right? There's uh, there's this famous report that says that women only apply with they have like 100% of the qualifications, while men apply even if they don't have all the qualifications. That makes a big difference. And I think that starts with language, and which is more difficult for women because we are like socialized not to be that assertive about ourselves, but also for academics in general. So if you're a woman coming from academia, be doubly careful about it because chances are that you're like just shrinking yourself, and then there's gonna be just someone that's more confident, not necessarily more qualified. They are gonna be able to present themselves much better and maybe get your job.
It's totally fair. How do you explain what you do to a non-technical person?
Yeah, that's always difficult. At
Right?
first, there are several like layers that you can go. Uh, Generally, I start with just scientist. Sometimes it's enough.
Okay.
It scares people enough. But if I have to go deeper, I tend to go more in a direction that makes it sound like I work with computers because I think it's easier than go into the details of quantum. Unfortunately, still is a rabbit hole whenever I try to explain quantum phenomena. But then the shortest way to explain is that I help people having access to quantum computers, and if someone really don't know what quantum computers are, maybe I can just uh, uh, pose it as a computer that's being developed more recently and has different capabilities and can be better in a few specific tasks. So I think that's a easy enough explanation. So I
Okay.
provide this access. I help making running tasks and checking for if it's working or not. And I also provide training for this new technology. I think that's the way not to get too technical about it.
Okay. So does your work focus heavily on quantum algorithms?
Yeah.
Okay, so what problem areas excite you the most right now in that space?
Um, I think I think in general we're gonna have a lot of progress with quantum chemistry. I think just because of the theory of quantum computers is I think it's gonna be very well suited for this sort of problems. But for my own personal taste, I like when a quantum computer problem is tackling a quantum physics problem just because it goes back to my roots. And so it's nice to see people working on simulating a Hamiltonian, trying to figure out physics, but using maybe a variational algorithm trying to really explore uh, physics through the lens of quantum computing, or and just finding out more about physics, either the theory, which is more on my part, or just finding out something interesting about how this algorithm behaves in a more mathematical sense. So this actually be better, and we can prove that's going to be better. I guess it's just my theoretical sides. I like seeing getting better limits on things and be able to say with confidence, oh, this algorithm's going to work well, or we learn a little bit more about this phase of matter because of this thing that we tried.
Okay, so where do you see the biggest near-term impact of algorithmic advances?
Um, there are interesting things going on in quantum machine learning. And yeah, once again, like I think chemistry and simulation materials, there's interesting developments. Um, I generally try not to put too much faith on near term because I think we need some more error corrected quantum computers to actually make things happen in a way that we can be sure that this is cool. But also, and then this is not really my area, but I see a lot of very exciting developments for the hardware parts. They are always coming up. Oh, we now have this system with less errors or new ways to make it fault tolerant, and it's always nice to look at it and see, wow, what can we do with this new apparatus?
What is one misconception? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't
Oh,
say anything.
okay.
Are you hearing a noise?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. What is one misconception people have about quantum algorithms that you wish you could make disappear?
Um, I think the biggest one is when people explain quantum algorithms as everything running all at once, trying all the possibilities at once,
Okay.
because it makes so difficult to explain. First of all, it's just not correct. But second of all, it just makes it difficult to explain that. Well, maybe this task will not be automatically better because of a quantum computer, right? There's so many, you need to be able to pose it in a way that is amenable for a quantum computer, both like just theoretically be able to map this into something that a quantum computer can work with. And then after that, you need to see if there is a physical quantum computer that's big enough or that has sufficiently control of errors, connectivity, and all that. This can also happen, right? So that simplification that makes it sound like it's gonna be better at anything all at once, even though like part of the beauty for me is that different problems will have different speed ups, and understanding this and like exploring this and noticing the impacts of that. That's the interesting part for me.
So you'd mentioned topological quantum computing. So explain to me why topological quantum computing, why that fascinates you, why that approach is interesting. What types of problems will that solve?
So I kind of migrate from this area, but when I was doing my PhD, I found it interesting, mostly because the theory is very interesting. The fact that you can have a system that you can use language from this field of mathematics that is generally so abstract, topology, to understand better the physics of something, right? In practice, what will happen is that the topological materials, and if you do it, if you build correctly a quantum computer, you could have more protection against errors, which is a big, big problem in quantum computers, right?
Hmm.
And there are like some caveats how you're gonna do operate certain operations, how you still may need error correction despite everything, and how the topological protection is not for all aspects. It's not universal. For you to have a universal quantum computer that's topological, it's not going to be fully protected. But still, it's very interesting. The main difficulty is to actually prove that you have something that is a topological quantum computer, and that has been an uphill battle for the experimentalists for such a long time. Uh, but the theory is very nice, and I still like secretly root for a topological quantum computer. I think would be such a big advancement because fighting errors would change completely the landscape of going for a path towards fault tolerance.
So, how do you view the current race among the hardware modalities?
Um, I like to I like to be informed of all different modalities. There's always interesting aspect from uh, the different ones. So in practice, I work a lot with supercomputing qubits because of IBM, the access that we have uh, through the cloud. Pricing wise, generally is easier to run algorithms through IBM. And the people that contact us, they're generally interested also in testing their algorithms with the IBM machines. But you have neutral atom quantum computers, for instance, they have in this interesting analog mode that you can explore. Uh, for instance, simulating Hamiltonians in a different way, that you can explore optimization problems in a different way that I think and then again, it has a very interesting physics behind that I think is fascinating. So if I could have worked more with that, there's then again topological that are also fascinated because of all this previous history that I have. So for me, I hope they continue to explore several different modalities all at once because I feel that they learn with each other. And you see this a lot of times, this cross pollination, like a quantum computer hardware explore a different way to do error mitigation. And then you see another one trying to go in a similar direction. So there's value on this diversity, and I hope it continues for a while.
What signals should the ecosystem watch out for to know which modalities can truly scale?
Um, I would say it's hard. It's hard to. So each modality will have their different challenges. So first of all, is to understand that the metrics that you're gonna watch out when reading a paper for one modality is different than the others. For instance, some computers have very slow gates, so it's gonna take longer to run an algorithm. So if you're not looking at the gate timing, for instance, for trapedians, then you're like this is something that maybe you wouldn't care too much in like superconductors. So maybe you need to ask the right questions for the right providers, right? The other thing that I guess I think people should be more mindful of is that sometimes there's a new announcement for companies, generally big tech. So they do like a press release. They give a very nice presentation, video or article that's very accessible. But then the person only read this. So it's not useful if you're only reading from the person that's claiming that they're doing whatever they're doing. So I feel like if you're an outsider, either if you're completely outside quantum or even if you like are in quantum technologies but not familiar with that particular hardware, never rely only on the press release of whoever is publishing this. You need to read different opinions. You need to really try to take a bigger picture and not take it for granted, whatever comes first in in whatever announcement that they have. You see this very often, like there will be very shiny new headlines about some new breakthrough that's based only on a press release. And I think that's a big concern.
So, you co founded Q Brazil. to popularize quantum technologies in Portuguese. What gap were you trying to close?
So when I first started doing science communication, it was around 2019. There was basically no one talking about quantum technologies, quantum computing. Like really, it was not a thing in Brazil. And so once I start getting more busy with PhD, once I move here to Canada, um, I would like to keep on going with that sort of communication because there's still a gap now. Like there are more developments, there are startups, there are companies and universities. They're more interested in trying to produce content. But when I first started, it was not really a thing. There was also an over reliance on English content. Sometimes you get English content that was not this super best quality. There was a lot of sensationalist uh, headlines once again that would get translated and be a bit misleading. So I didn't like the idea of relying on English content, and also the idea that people would be okay with reading English. That's not true. That's not really the reality. We don't have that many people that speak English in Brazil, right?
Okay.
The proficiency of English is around 5%. So we're probably excluding a bunch of people, right? Unless we're translating and unless we're translating well. So that was something that was always in my mind. And I was doing, in principle, I was doing by sheer force of my own will. I would just like decide to write about quantum superposition, but that was very hard. So once I start talking to people about how I found important to maintain, try to keep on producing content that was reliable in Portuguese, I found other people with similar ideas. And in particular, another a friend of mine, Raissa, we met through this shared interest. She was also abroad. She was like, "Oh, I was looking for people talking about quantum technologies in Portuguese, and I found you." And then she shared this interest with me, and we're like, "Okay, we should do something." And then I went because of other, uh, um, because kind of a coincidence, but I ended up going to Netherlands for an event alone. Ethical, I think it was about, yeah, about science communication in a sense and societal aspects in quantum technologies. And then I met a lot of people from Q World. And I explained that I want to do something Portuguese. They were like, you should do Q Brazil. And then
Mm-hmm.
I just took their advice. It's like, okay, we're going to do Q Brazil, but it's going to be in Portuguese mostly. And they're like, okay, you do you. And then, yeah, so we did. And I think it worked very well. Keyword is very supportive. We like the idea of having something that's really not for profit. They're very well organized, so it's nice to be under their wings in this project. And it's been working very nicely. We have more than 1 year now.
That's fantastic. So let me ask you, if you could redesign quantum education from scratch, what would you change first?
Oof, yeah. I don't feel super confident about my skills on education itself. I like doing outreach, uh, but I feel like sometimes I lack the actual theoretical background on how to teach people, especially high school. My, um, I guess I would like to be able to make it more democratic in terms of assessing high quality simulations, for instance. At some point when I mentioned I was in Colorado for a while, and that was kind of my first contact with science communication before I really went to that route. And I work at FET, which is one the physical simulations project, I guess, that they have a University of Colorado Boulder. So they do little like simulations that you can play around, and they have a lot of they you can translate them. So you have I worked one on the Hooke's law, for instance, but they have photoelectric effects. They have stuff in quantum that you can play and see what happens in a very visual way. And I feel like this is very lacking. And when you go to, depending on where you are, you have less access to laboratories, right? So having an animation or like a game or something, that would be very useful if you don't have access to a practical thing that you can look at. And of course, if you do have access to labs, this is very great too. Uh, but yeah, I think there's so many good content that will bring people's attention to quantum in a way that is not damaging, that's not like fantastic. Uh, and we should make an effort to bring this to the front, I guess.
What do you think is the biggest mistake technical experts make when explaining quantum to non-technical audiences?
Mm, that's, um, I still think the idea that everything runs at once is one like the root of most evil. But I guess for if I were to expand beyond quantum algorithms, I think one thing that should be emphasized more uh, is the fact that quantum technologies have uh, consequences that we should watch out for. For instance, it can weaken security systems because of Shor's algorithm, for instance, right? We need to rethink cryptography, and that might involve even like public participation and like investments to change the infrastructure or to get high qualified personnel to actually put in place the security concerns, right? Uh, I think there's sometimes the idea of quantum as a technology that is neutral and will only bring good because you can simulate things and you can create drug discovery, these kind of things. And we don't discuss enough about the challenges, and there are challenges, and we should look out for this. For instance, you can discover drugs, and you can create new drugs that will help people, but you can also create a chemical weapon. There's always some like aspect that you should watch out for, and I feel like the sometimes the conversation steers on a very too optimistic of a outlook for what quantum computers and other quantum technologies can do.
Should How should the industry think about global inequities in access to quantum?
I think this is hard because it's very difficult to make the industry stakeholders care about this in particular because there are no incentives for that. Um, that we need to be more policies in places, but it's kind of hard because I feel like the discussion on quantum policy in general is also something that is still maturing. Um, I feel like it's much easier to engage other sectors of people involved, like university professors, like professor in general, people interested, um, science communicators. There are all these other stakeholders that could look at the inequalities uh, and be more compelled to do something about it. So I guess maybe one pathway is to have the discussion, bring to the forefront, explain that you have all these problems that can come from quantum tech that can bridge the gap between global north and global south. And if you get these other stakeholders care, maybe the industry will follow later. But starting from industry, to be honest, I'm a bit skeptical.
What structural changes would most improve retention of women in deep tech fields?
Uh, I think that we could go for a route of trying to bring more people through diversity hires. That there was a pathway that 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 is exploring technology, but I believe uh, a bit for personal experience that seeing someone in the place that you aspire to, or even like you don't aspire to, like you see a scientist, and then that's the first time that you're gonna consider actually pursuing scientists. So if you can put those people on the forefront, like for instance with a podcast on women in science, maybe we can try to bring attention to the fact that these people exist and that this is a viable pathway for someone's career. Um, I remember that for me, one of the important aspects, one of the it's minor, something that happened like very a long time ago, but I remember just like reading through some magazine and then I saw some article about a scientist that she was working on in CERN. And I don't know, I think I was 15 at the time, and it never occurred to me that women were doing science. I was like, okay, the last woman in science that I remember is Mahiki. That was
Hmm.
not. Then you think that it's really far away, right? If you're like in Brazil in 2000 something, like that felt so different. And that's when it hits me, wow, like I don't really have role models. They exist, but people are not talking about them. So I have to go through a very random like news magazine to find about her, and I got very inspired. And then later I bought a book. So like just the fact that she existed in an area that I'm not following it, she's in like high energy physics, but the fact that she exists kind of just changed my whole perspective of how this could be a career, right? Uh, and I think it's important because if you don't believe first that this is a pathway that you can pursue, doesn't matter if there are initiatives within the university or anything within the industry to make you stay or make you come to like get and try to actually apply for these roles if you don't think from within yourself that this is a thing that can happen, right? So I think it kind of is a grassroots effort. It will be a more effective one.
And that's one of the reasons behind having the podcast is that I am in marketing and technology. I find quantum to be incredibly exciting. And I don't have to be a physicist to be interested. I just have to be curious and be open to, no matter when I think I've understand something finally, and then someone else says something and I'm starting again. I'm like constantly like the Alice in Wonderland. I'm just falling and falling and falling and learning the whole time, which I love. It's just incredibly exciting. So, what advice would you give to a young woman in Brazil or anywhere, who's quantum curious but unsure where to start?
Uh, there now, at this point, I think there are more resources and more places to look. There are in Brazil and hopefully in other places. If you really search up university programs, you find a lot of like opportunities to engage in a high school level that comes generally from the students or a few professors that might be for free or very or not that expensive, and that's a very nice and cool way to engage uh, before actually choosing a career path, especially for high school kids, right? Because you get access to labs, you get access to people that you can later on send an email and understand how they like how it's like to work with quantum technologies. I also believe if you don't have, for any reason, you cannot get access to universities. Right now, we're so connected, especially through LinkedIn and social media, that it's easier to reach out to people. And one thing that I noticed actually, especially when I in social, no, I would say on LinkedIn as well, many people reach out to me, but for a large margin, most of them are men. They ask me about career advice, and I'm glad to help if I can. But I noticed that there's way fewer women asking, and I don't think that's because they are not interested. Because I feel like there's a relatively proportional amount of people that follow me or that ask me to connect on LinkedIn that are women and men, but I feel like they're at least a little more shy to ask for something. So encourage them to go there and just ask. Like send this first message and just say, "Wow, I'd like to maybe have a mentor," or "I have this question or this other question." And like more often than not, you're gonna get some help. And remember, the men are asking. The men are asking, so you should too.
I think that's perfect advice. So if people want to know more about what you do and more about, what you're talking about, where can they find, what are the resources that you can provide that are free about what you're doing?
So I guess the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn as Bruna Shinohara. I do have some compilation resources that I save on a Notion webpage. It might be a bit more difficult to find, but it's easy. Maybe I can provide social media
Perfect.
links later. Yeah, because
I can put that in
the
the
link is
notes.
gigantic. I would say LinkedIn is easier to find me, but I do have a YouTube channel. There's also Bruna Shinohara. I am on Instagram. Yeah, reach out.
Well, that's great. I'll put in all the links, and I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoy speaking to women such as you to just see the different faces of quantum and, and to show young women out there that there is a space for you and it's exciting and you should go for it and ask questions. So,
Right.
thank you again for your time. I'm going to let the music take us out.
Thank you.